Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Bright on Buddhism. This week we will be continuing our reading and discussion of the Rolf W. Giebel translation of the Vajrasekhara Sutra. Remember that this title can be roughly translated as the Adamantine Pinnacle Sutra. Vajra in this context means thunderbolt, but it can also refer to the quality of being diamond-like, like adamantine, and Sekhara means realization, achievement, or to summit, hence pinnacle. This title actually refers to several different texts, but the one that we'll be using is the most important and influential in Chinese and Japanese Shingon Buddhism. Part 2 of Fascicle 3 contains sections on the secret knowledges of esoteric Buddhism and the miscellaneous rules for protecting them. Here, yet more of the critically important and most closely preserved rituals of esoteric Buddhism are described and explained in detail. We hope you enjoy. Six. 4 varieties of seal knowledge. Then, having conferred the heart mantras, the teacher should teach the disciple the 4 knowledge seals of his own chief deity. He addresses the disciple in the following manner, saying, "Be discreet toward other people, and do not show even one of these seals to those as yet unacquainted with them. Why is this? Whenever sentient beings who have not seen the great mandala bind these seals, none of them will be successful. Then they will engender doubt and bring calamity upon themselves, dying quickly and falling into the great hell of immediate retribution, or falling into the evil destinies." Knowledge of the Great Seals. Next, the teacher should explain the knowledge of the Great Seal, Mahamudra, for accomplishing all the Tathagatas and the Great Sattvas. Starting from knowledge of the mind, one should visualize an adamantine sun. Visualizing oneself in the form of a Buddha, one should recite Adamantine Realm. By merely accomplishing this, one will obtain knowledge, longevity, strength, and youth. One will be able to go anywhere, and even the state of a Buddha will not be difficult to attain. This is the seal for the realization of the enlightenment of all the Tathagatas. Next, the teacher should explain the binding of the Great Seal for accomplishing Vajrasattva. Brandishing the Vajra pestle with haughty air and maintaining adamantine pride, with the Vajras of the body, speech, and mind, one becomes Vajrasattva. Thereby one seal for going everywhere, lordship over all desires, well-being, supernatural powers, longevity, strength, and superior form become similar to Vajrasattva. Through the rite of the 3 Vajras of body, speech, and mind, and practicing in sequence as drawn in the mandala, one accomplishes the great sattvas, each associated with their respective insignia and seals. I shall now explain of all the teachings that which accomplishes that which is accomplished, and the great action of the accomplished ones. I shall now explain them in order. Every day, having first performed self-empowerment and so forth at the proper time, one accomplishes as at the beginning, after which one should follow one's inclinations in practice. Next, the teacher should explain in detail the rules of accomplishing the great seals. Having made the Vajra enter, one should bind, according to the rules, the great seal and contemplate the great sattva in front. Seeing the knowledge sattva, one should visualize him in oneself. Summoning by hook, inducting, binding, and delighting, one gains success. The mantras for these are Vajrasattva, Ah. This is the heart mantra for entry of the Vajra. Vajrasattva, Dirshya. Vajrasattva, appear. This is the heart mantra for meditating on the great sattva. Jahum Vam Ho. This is the heart mantra for summoning by hook, inducting, binding, and delighting the great sattva. Reciting Samayas Dvam. You are the pledge. One enters a lunar disk behind one, wherein one should visualize oneself as the knowledge sattva reciting I, Samayas Dvam. Practicing in accordance with the seal of that sattva, one visualizes oneself as that sattva. With adamantine speech, one is able to accomplish all seals. Reciting Jahum Vam Ho, one brings all the Buddhas into one's body. One should perform good contemplation and effect the accomplishment of the great seals. Now I shall explain the deeds, the unsurpassed adamantine action. By achieving visualization of the Buddhas, one quickly obtains the own nature of a Buddha. Accomplishing Sattva Vajri, one becomes the Lord of all Buddhas. By binding the seal of Ratna Vajri, one becomes the Lord of all gems. If one accomplishes Dharma Vajri, then one is able to uphold the Buddha's Dharma. By means of the seal of Karma Vajri, one performs adamantine action. One accomplishes Vajrasattva by binding Vajrasattva's seal. One is able to summon the Vajra holders through union with Vajraksha. The great seal of Vajraraga is able to enrapture all Buddhas. One delights all Buddhas through union with Vajrasadhu. One grants the consecration of the Buddhas through the rite of the gem seal. One quickly becomes adamantine light through the rite of Vajrateja. If one cultivates Vajraketu, then one fulfills all wishes. Through the rite of Vajrahasa, one playfully laughs together with all Buddhas. One upholds the adamantine Dharma through the rite of Vajradharma. One obtains the superior wisdom of all Buddhas through the rite of Vajratikshna. If one cultivates Vajrachakra, then one is able to turn the Dharma wheel. One accomplishes the Buddha's speech through the rite of Vajrabhasa. One quickly attains adamantine action by performing the rite of Vajrakarma. Putting on adamantine armor, one obtains an adamantine body. Accomplishing Vajrayaksha, one becomes like Vajrayaksha. All seals are successful in binding the adamantine fist. By means of Vajralasya, one obtains great adamantine delight. By binding the seal of Vajramala, one obtains consecration from the Buddhas. In union with Vajragita, one obtains adamantine song. By binding the seal of Vajranircha, one makes offerings to all Buddhas. One delights all and everything through the rite of Vajradupa. In union with Vajrapushpa, one causes the various kinds of beings to show respect. By making offerings with the seal of Vajraloka, one obtains vision. One is able to eliminate all suffering through the rite of Vajragandha. By summoning with Vajrankusha, one is able to perform all superior action. One is able to induct everything through the rite of Vajrapasha. In union with Vajrasvota, one becomes competent at binding all. Through the rite of Vajravesha, one is able to accomplish all entry. Knowledge of the Samaya seals. Next, the teacher should explain the knowledge of the adamantine Samaya seals, Samaya Mudra, of all the Tathagatas. Joining the palms firmly together with all the fingers interlaced is called the adamantine clasp, Vajranyali. The same gesture with the fingers tightly bound is the adamantine bind, Vajrabandha. The Samaya seals are all born from the adamantine bind. I shall now explain the rules for binding the Samaya seals. The adamantine bind is unsurpassed. With the Sattva Vajra seal made firm, the middle fingers are raised erect like a shoot. With the thumbs and middle fingers like the shape of a gem, the middle fingers are bent. The middle fingers are altered to resemble lotus petals. The middle fingers are interlocked within. The forefingers touch the middle fingers. This is called the seal of the fifth Buddha. I shall now fully explain the superior seals of the Samayas of the Tathagata family, by the binding of which one gains success. With the two hands joined together in the shape of a moon, the middle fingers are raised erect like a Vajra, and the finger pads of the remaining thumbs and little fingers do not touch. The forefingers like hooks, the forefingers crossed, and with a gesture as if to snap the fingers. This is the group of seals of the foursome of Vajrasattva. The seal Gem Vajra, the four fingers are bent with the finger pads joined. The middle ring and little fingers are stretched out, and the hands are rotated and placed level with the heart. The ring fingers, raised erect like a banner, are joined to the little fingers. Then the previous seal rests in the place of laughter, i.e. the mouth. These are designated as their seals, i.e. the seals of Vajraratna, etc. Raising the two thumbs equally erect, the forefingers are bent like a lotus. Then the seal adamantine sword. The middle fingers are joined with the upper phalanges bent. Then both ring fingers are raised together and the little fingers are crossed like a wheel. Then releasing the bind of the thumbs, the seal is stretched out and raised from the mouth. The finger pads of the little fingers and thumbs are joined and brought together. This is the seal Karma Vajra. Then both forefingers together, placed level with the heart, are stretched out. The forefingers are bent like tusks, as are the little fingers too. With the thumbs and little fingers touching in between, the forefingers are bent down onto the thumbs. The thumbs are raised together at the heart. Stretching the forearm is called the garland seal. The superior palms and adamantine clasp are dispersed from the mouth. Having performed the gestures of dance, the palms are joined above the head. The adamantine bind is bestowed downward. One's own palms are offered upward. The forefingers are both pressed together. The hands are stretched out as if in the gesture of applying unguent. One forefinger is bent. The two forefingers are bound in a knot. The tips of the thumbs and forefingers resemble a chain. The palms are joined as in the adamantine fist. I shall now explain that which accomplishes the supreme right of adamantine accomplishment. One's own seal is placed level with the heart in the concentration of the Sattva Vajra. Next I shall explain the performance of deeds, the unsurpassed adamantine action. By assembling the Tathagatas with the seals of the adamantine realm and so forth, the master of the altar accomplishes the empowerment of the disciple in a moment. If one binds the Sattva Vajri seal, then one becomes like Vajradhara. Merely binding the seal, adamantine hook, one is able to summon all Buddhas. Through the rite of desire Vajra, Raga Vajra, or Vajraraga, one enraptures even the enlightened ones. Through the seal adamantine joy, all Buddhas rejoice with voices of applause. By binding the seal Gem Vajra, one obtains consecration from the Buddhas. By binding the seal adamantine sun, one obtains a halo of light, like a Buddha. Having held the adamantine banner, one then fulfills all wishes. Through the rite of Vajrahasa, one laughs together with all Buddhas. Displaying the seal Dharma Vajra, one is identical with Dharma Vajra, or Vajradharma. Displaying everywhere the seal adamantine sword, one obtains wisdom and becomes savior of the world. Cultivating the seal adamantine wheel, one is then able to turn the Dharma wheel. Through the rite of Vajrabhasa, adamantine speech is accomplished. Displaying everywhere the seal Karma Vajra, one is identical with Vajrakarma. Firmly making the seal adamantine protection, one achieves a body like a Vajra. With the superior seal adamantine tusk, one is able to destroy wicked demons. Firmly binding the adamantine fist, one controls all seals. Through the play seal, one obtains joy. Through the garland seal, one obtains adornments. Through the speech seal, one's speech becomes awe-inspiring. One obtains offerings by means of the dance seal. With the incense seal, one delights the world. Through the flower seal, one becomes graceful in form. Through the lamp seal, the world is purified. Through the unguent seal, one obtains wonderful fragrance. Through the seal adamantine hook, one achieves summoning. The seal adamantine noose achieves induction. The seal adamantine chain is able to bind. The seal adamantine bell affects entry. Knowledge of the Dharma seals. I shall now explain the Dharma seals, or the Dharma mudra. The mantra, Vajrajanam, adamantine knowledge, is common to the 5 Buddhas and is able to make firm the adamantine realm. Next, I shall now fully explain the superior pledges of the Dharma seals in accordance with the basic rules. Reciting Samayastvam, you are the pledge, one becomes the lord of all seals. Having recited Anayashva, lead hither, one is then able to summon by hook all Buddhas. Having chanted Aho Sukha, O bliss, one enraptures all Buddhas. Sadhu, sadhu, well done, well done. Having said this, with applause, one causes all to rejoice. Having recited Sumahastvam, you are great, one then obtains the consecration of all Buddhas. Having said Rupa Dyota, shining in form, one then obtains the majestic splendor of the true Dharma. Reciting Arthaprapti, acquisition of objectives, one is able to fulfill all most excellent wishes. Ha ha hum he. Laughing thus, one obtains the Tathagata's subtle smile. Sarvakari, all-doer. Having recited this, one is able to purify what is contrary to the Dharma, making everything pure. Having recited Dukkacheda, terminator of suffering, one is able to cut off all action producing the sensation of suffering. Buddha Bodhi, Buddha's enlightenment. Having said this, one becomes Lord in the mandala. Having recited Pratisabda, echo, one converses together with the Buddhas. Having recited Suvasitvam, fine subduing, one is master of everything everywhere. Having said Nirbhayastvam, you are fearless, one then obtains fearlessness in a moment. Reciting Satrubhaksha, devourer of enemies, one is able to devour all foes. Sarvasiddhi, all accomplishment. Having said this, one obtains all wondrous siddhis. Maharati, great joy, one obtains delight. Rupa Sobe, beautiful in form. Likewise, Shrotra Saukya, pleasant to the ear, one obtains pleasure. Sarva Puje, all offering, one obtains offerings. Praladini, delighting one obtains delight. Palagami, bringer of fruits, one obtains fruits. Sute Jagri, magnificently splendid one. One obtains splendor. Sugandangi, fragrantly limbed one. One obtains fragrance. Ayahija, come hither Ja. One accomplishes hook summoning. Ahi hum hum, come hither hum hum. One is able to induct. Hey Svotavam, hey, chain, vam. One gains much. Ganta, ah, ah. Bell, ah, ah. One causes to tremble. I shall now explain the rite of accomplishment of the Dharma seals, which renders pure. Visualizing a Vajra on the tongue, one is able to perform all deeds. Knowledge of the Karma seals. Next, the Karma seals, Karma Mudra, are explained. One should bind the adamantine fist and in mental equipoise divide it in two. This produces two adamantine seals. Next, the binding of the Karma seals is explained. Holding the adamantine forefinger, the right hand is placed on the left. This is called Supreme Awakening and is able to confer the Buddha's enlightenment. The seal of the Buddha Akshobhya is called Earth Touching. That of Ratnasambhava, Wish Granting Seal. The seal of Amitayus is called Supreme Concentration, and that of Amoghasiddhi, Granting Fearlessness. Next, I shall now fully explain and sequence the Karma seals of Vajrasattva and so forth, which are able to effect adamantine action. The left fist indicates pride, and the right brandishes a Vajra. The two fists rest in a gesture of holding hooks. One applies oneself as in archery. The gesture of applause is placed level with a heart. The two adamantine fists are placed on the place of consecration, the forehead. One shows the form of a sun level with the heart. The right elbow rests on the left fist. The two palms reach toward the mouth. The right fist makes as if to open the lotus in the left fist. The left fist rests level with the heart, and the right fist holding a sword kills. The two fists are rotated like a fire wheel. The two adamantine fists are dispersed at the mouth. Having rotated an adamantine dance, the fists, released, pass both cheeks and rest on the crown of the head. Armor. The little fingers are made to represent tusks. The two fists are joined together. With adamantine pride, one should make homage with mind a-tremble. One fastens a garland. One brings the fist below the mouth. One rotates the fists in adamantine dance. With the right of the adamantine fists, one should make offerings of incense and so forth. The offerings to all Buddhas, they are differentiated as the offering seals. The little fingers are interlocked and the forefingers resemble large hooks. The hands resemble a noose. The two forefingers resemble a chain. The backs of the hands are pressed together. I shall now explain the rite of accomplishment equivalent to the performance of adamantine action. One should cultivate visualization of a Karma Vajra in the heart. Next, the various adamantine actions of the Karma seals will be explained. By binding the knowledge fist, one is able to make Buddha knowledge enter. By binding the seal of Akshobhya, one obtains immobility of mind. By binding the seal of Ratnasambhava, one is able to embrace and receive others. By binding the seal Dharma Wheel, one is then able to turn the Dharma Wheel. Through the seal Supreme Fearlessness, one quickly bestows fearlessness upon sentient beings. Firmly making the seal Adamantine Pride, one obtains the bliss of Vajrasattva. Through the seal Adamantine Hook Summons, one assembles all Buddhas in a moment. With adamantine arrows, one enraptures even the adamantine wife. With the seal Adamantine Joy, the Buddhas all accord voices of applause. Binding the seal Great Adamantine Gem, one receives consecration from the masters. Displaying everywhere the seal Adamantine Sun, one becomes like Adamantine Sun, Vajrasurya, or Vajrateja. If one raises erect the seal Adamantine Banner, then one causes a shower of gems to rain down. Displaying everywhere the seal Adamantine Laughter, one quickly laughs on par with the Buddhas. If one displays everywhere the seal Adamantine Flower, then one sees Vajradharma. Firmly binding the seal Adamantine Sword, one is able to cut off all suffering. Displaying everywhere the seal Adamantine Wheel, one is able to turn the Dharma Wheel. All the speech of the Buddhas is accomplished by the seal Adamantine Speech. The offering of the Adamantine Dance brings even the Buddhas to submission. By putting on adamantine armor, one obtains an adamantine core. Displaying everywhere the seal Adamantine Tusk, one is able to destroy even Vajras. With the seal Adamantine Fist, one is able to carry off everything, and one gains success with the seals. With the seal Adamantine Joy, one obtains delight. With the seal adamantine garland, exquisite form. With the seal adamantine song, wondrous speech. And with the seal adamantine dance, renders submissive. With the incense seal, the mind rejoices. With the flower seal, one carries off everything. The lamp offering seal brings great effulgence, and the seal adamantine unguent, fragrance. The seal adamantine hook is able to summon. The seal adamantine noose is able to induct. The seal adamantine chain causes to be bound. And the seal adamantine bell causes to tremble. 7. Miscellaneous rules. I shall now explain in detail the rules for seal binding common to all 4 varieties of seals. First, one should break the adamantine bind with a clap level with the heart, reciting the following heart mantra. Vajrabandha Trat. Adamantine bind, Trat. Thereupon, one gains mastery of all seal binding in the Vajras of one's body, speech, and mind. Then one binds the Samaya seal for entry of the Vajra, reciting this heart mantra. Ah. Thereupon one will achieve complete avesha, entry, as if empowered by a close friend. Then, with the Samaya seal, one contemplates the great sattva, reciting this heart adamantine mantra. Maha Samaya Sattvo Ham. I am the great pledge being. Through this mantra, all seals will be successful. The above are the extended rules for success in all seals. I shall now explain the extended rules common to this scripture. First, one binds one's own deity's seal. Having bound it, one visualizes oneself as the sattva of one's seal with this heart mantra. Samayo Ham. I am the pledge. Then, having visualized oneself as the sattva of one's seal, one empowers oneself with this mantra. Samaya Sattva Diti Stashva Mam. O pledge being, empower me. Thereafter one will be successful. The above are the rules for accomplishment. Next, I shall explain first the case when one desires the accomplishment of material objectives with this mantra. Artha Siddhi, accomplishment of objectives. Through this mantra, one gains adamantine accomplishment at will. Next, I shall explain the accomplishment of adamantine siddhi with this heart mantra. Vajrasiddhi, adamantine accomplishment. Next, I shall explain the accomplishment of the Vajradhara with this heart mantra. Vajra Vidyadhara, adamantine Vidyadhara. Through this, one will obtain the accomplishment of the Vidyadhara at will. If one desires the supreme accomplishment, one should seek accomplishment with the mantra of one's own deity's seal. I shall now explain the rules common to all seals for making oneself become firm like a Vajra in the Vajras of one's body, speech, and mind. If the seal empowerment should become lax, or if one's mind should wish to release the seal, then one should make firm with this heart mantra. The mantra is Om Vajrasattva Samayam Anupalaya Vajrasattvat Vinopatista Dirdo me bhava Sutosyo me bhava Anurakto me bhava Suposyo me bhava Sarva siddhim me prayacha Sarva karmasu kame chitasreya Kuru Hum ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarvatatagata Vajra Mame Mucha Vajri Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ah. Om, O Vajrasattva, keep your pledge. Be close at hand as Vajrasattva. Be firm for me. Be well pleased in me. Be attached to me. Be well nurturing for me. Grant me all success and bring about happiness of mind for me in all actions. Hum ha 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 ho. O Lord Vajra of all the Tathagatas, do not abandon me. Be like a Vajra, great pledge being. Ah. By means of this mantra, even if one commits the 5 sins that bring immediate retribution, slanders all the Tathagatas and the true Dharma of the vast great vehicle, or performs all manner of misdeeds, one will still obtain success. Owing to the firm state of Vajrasattva, he who practices the seals of all the Tathagatas will obtain, in this present lifetime quickly and at his pleasure, all supreme accomplishments, including the attainment of the supreme siddhi of the Tathagata. Thus spoke the Lord Vajrasattva of all the Tathagatas. I shall now explain the rules for release common to all seals. From wherever they may have arisen, all seals are to be released in that same place with this heart mantra. Vajra Mu. Raising the adamantine gem seal from one's heart and resting it on the place of consecration, i.e. the forehead, one consecrates oneself with the forefingers and parts of the hands as if to tie a garland around one's head. Next, one fastens on armor with this heart mantra. Om Vajraratna Bisincha Mam. Sarva Mudram Me Dirdikuru Varakava Chenavam. Om, O adamantine gem, consecrate me. Make every seal firm for me with this excellent armor, Vam. Having put on the armor, one claps with the palms at the same level and causes joy with this heart mantra. Vajratushya Ho. O Vajra, rejoice, Ho. Releasing the bound seals with this heart mantra, one obtains joy. One also attains an adamantine state, just like Vajrasattva. If one recites Vajrasattva just once, one will abide in well-being in accordance with one's mind's desires. By merely reciting, everything is quickly accomplished, as has been taught by Vajrapani. Thus spoke the Lord Samantabhadra. The actions for performing all the accomplishments of Vajrasattva and other sattvas are all successful in all deeds when one recites mindfully at will in this scripture. Mantras, heart mantras, seals, and spells, cultivating as one pleases the guiding principles for these either expounded in the teachings or undertaken by oneself. They will all bring success everywhere. Next, the 4 varieties of secret offering will be explained. They should be performed with this mantra of the adamantine song. Om Vajrasattva Samgrahad Vajraratnam Anutaram Vajradharma Gayanais Ka Vajrakarmakaro Bhava. Om, through the protection of the adamantine being Vajrasattva, the adamantine jewel Vajraratna is unsurpassed. And, with the chantings of the adamantine teaching Vajradharma, be a doer of adamantine action, Vajrakarma. Within the inner mandala, one makes offerings, singing with this adamantine song of praise, dancing with the adamantine dance, using the 2 palms, and offering flowers and so forth. In the outer mandala, having made offerings with the seals, adamantine incense, and so forth, one places the offerings in their proper place. All the disciples should make offerings according to their means. The teacher announces the disciples' objectives to all the Tathagatas, and the needs of those who, having made offerings of incense and so forth at will, have entered the mandala. He satisfies with every article of all nourishment, food and drink, comfort, and so forth, already offered to the great mandala according to their means. Then the teacher should confer upon them the prohibitory precept of the Vajra for the accomplishment of all the Tathagatas. This Vajra represents the quintessence of all the Buddhas, resting in Vajrasattva's hand. You too should always uphold the firm prohibitory precept of Vajrasattva. Om Sarva Tathagata Siddhi Vajra Samaya Tista Esatvam Dharayami Vajrasattva Hi Hom. Om, O pledge of the Vajra for the accomplishment of all the Tathagatas, abide, I hold you. Vajrasattva Hi Hom. Then the teacher should address each, saying, do not speak of this to others, whereupon they recite the oath heart mantra. Then he announces the names of those who entered earlier the mandala to all the Tathagatas. Binding the Sattva Vajri seal, he releases it upward from below with this heart mantra. Om Kirtova Sarva Sarvarta Siddhi Datta Yathanuga Gachadvam Buddha Visayam Punar Agamanayatu Vajrasattva Mu. Om, benefit has been brought to you by all sentient beings and success has been given accordingly. Return to the Buddha's realm, but to come again. Vajrasattva Mu. In this manner should it be performed in all mandalas, and so is the release of the supreme seals of the Samayas performed. Thus concludes the Adamantine Pinnacle, the compendium of the truth of all the Tathagatas and the realization of the great vehicle, being the scripture of the great King of Teachings, Fascicle 3. So that was the final part of Fascicle 3 of the Vajrasekhara Sutra. Docs, what did you think?
So, this was mostly a description of rituals like the last one, but in this case we're seeing more descriptions of mudras, so body and hand poses. While I was reading this, I was trying to follow along with what the hand motions would look like, but the descriptions are mixed and muddled and unclear enough that I couldn't follow along. What does it mean to hold one's fingers in the shape of a gem? What does it mean to hold one's fingers in the shape of a lotus? Like, lotus I can kind of get. It would be like a blooming flower figure, but like a gem, depending on what kind of gem and how it's cut, could be shaped like anything. So like, how is one meant to follow along on these? Is this something where initiates would already know what these descriptions indicate?
Yeah, so you bring up a very good point, a very important point for this. There's different types of esoteric Buddhism that we've talked about. Tibetan Buddhism is very esoteric, and Japanese Shingon Buddhism is very esoteric. And there's also different schools in both China and Japan which have esoteric elements. And of all of those that practice things like mudras and these body poses, there are different versions of them according to these different interpretations of what these things mean. So this is sort of like an attempt to write down the instructions just for posterity so that they're kind of standardized and they last longer than human memory. But the exact shape, the exact nature of the mudras that you do will depend on your Dharma lineage. So that's specifically the relationship between master and student within a specific sect. And then also, again, it'll depend on the sect. So it's not that every single master can interpret these freely, but it is such that these things change and are not perfectly preserved over time. Now, in some cases, like the lotus flower or some others, like ones where the Buddha is sort of depicted in a statue making these mudras, those cases are very well preserved. But some of these more ambiguous and interpretive cases, like the shape of a gem or other things like that, they can sometimes be lost, changed, reinterpreted, redone. Some of them are also very physically difficult to do. And a lot of times, especially in Japanese Buddhism, these mudras have to be done in quick succession. And so they might be abbreviated or changed to make it easier to go from one to the other rather quickly. So these things are kind of ambiguous sometimes and change depending on your lineage and your sect and the location in which you're doing them and the purpose for which you're doing them and things like that.
Okay, so very interpretive, and the fact that I couldn't follow along is not at all unusual. Alright, so after reading the whole thing, so we get into the same deal of like this is secret knowledge as we discussed in the last Vajrasekhara episode. And again, as we discussed in that episode, when we're here, I suspect that either there is a lot of instruction from the teacher that's not actually written down here, and or there's a lot of stuff that is written down here that has a very different meaning for someone who is initiated. So, again, even though the sutra describes that this is secret information that can lead to dire consequences if used incorrectly, the actual secret part's not here.
That's exactly right. And this is especially true in this particular part because we're dealing so much with descriptions of mudras. So it's like, how do you describe a physical pose or an image to another person using words, written words? It's like if I decided that the Mona Lisa was secret and preserved, and I tried to describe Mona Lisa's smile or Mona Lisa's pose or the colors of the painting to you, but I didn't let you see it. That's sort of what's happening with this sutra, and that's why it doesn't seem like the secret is really revealed. I don't recommend that you try to make these mudras just for safety reasons along the way while you read about them, but if you did try, it wouldn't really go very well, right? They're very difficult to interpret and to understand and to actually verify if you've done them right. And a lot of closely, very highly secretive, preserved ritual texts, aside from sutras, that these lineages will have like drawings of these mudras, or they'll have more information about them so that they can refer to those for instruction and for giving these sort of seals, these mudras, to their students when the time comes, whenever they are initiated into that level of the tradition. And this sutra alone doesn't have any of that, where, you know, the average reader would be going along and think, wow, it would really help if I could see what their hands look like when they do this. They leave that out on purpose. And these different lineages will have their own interpretations that they will keep much more secret, and which we can't access. We can't show on this show because that's the real secret stuff. That's one of the things that we talked about last time. All this stuff is talked about as being secret, but the actual secret part we can't have and we don't have. And it's just describing the secret nature of these things and how it's very dangerous and stuff like that. So this part alone, even if you are able to accidentally replicate a mudra correctly according to how it's described in this text, you don't know. And so doing it in an unknowing fashion, it kind of takes the venom out of the snake, because you can't really understand what you're doing. You can't understand that you've discovered something secret if you discover it in that accidental fashion.
Makes sense. So what I have left, I have a few questions about specific things that are mentioned in the supernatural powers. So, for one, there are several of these that have some variation of obtains fragrance as their benefit. If I recall correctly, this is usually involved in deities in this system that involve unguents, which is a medicine mainly working on smell, as I understand it. So is that what's going on here? Or is, like, smelling nice actually a superpower here?
It's not metaphorical at all. It's very literal. There's lots of stories of, for example, Kukai himself, the founder of Shingon Buddhism in Japan. He is said, of course, not to have died, but to have gone into this eternal meditation. So he's sort of in a very deep meditative state, and he has to be fed and has to be clothed and stuff. And there's a story about when he first went into that state, where a master went to go change his clothes, and he brought a disciple with him who was, I think, 8 or 10 years old. And the disciple started crying because he couldn't see Kukai. He couldn't see the physical body of Kukai to know that he was there in eternal meditation. The disciple was like, I've been lied to and Kukai died and he's not here. And the master was like, no, that's not how it works. He's still here. And the master took his hand and laid it upon the knee of Kukai's meditating form, which had been invisible, I guess, because it's representing sort of the secretiveness and the initiatory nature of things. And whenever the 10-year-old disciple's hand actually touched something, then he could suddenly see Kukai and understand that Kukai was there meditating. And then he took that hand away, and allegedly for the entire rest of his life, he went on to go and, become the head monk of a temple and teach other students and be a Dharma master and have disciples and stuff. And apparently that hand that touched Kukai's leg never stopped smelling good. And that's not like symbolic, that's not metaphorical, that's not literary. Like, it literally smelled like flowers, according to these texts. And so here, obtaining fragrance is kind of a superpower because of, like you say, this medicine nature of scent and this medicine nature of smells. It smells in a way that cleans the air, so to speak. One of the functions of incense and other burned herbs in ancient Indian philosophy and in history in Asia is the idea that in order to purify dirty or illness-carrying air, you can burn these herbs in incense. And that fragrance, the smell, is what's doing the work. This is completely debunked by germ theory and whatnot, but they don't have that. So this is why, in Europe in the plague years, there's a lot of images you see of these doctors that have these really scary masks on. They look like a bird with a very long beak, and in the beak part of the mask is stuffed all of these herbs, which are supposed to purify, cleanse the air. And it did work a little bit in the sense that it blocked respiratory droplets from getting into, the airways of the doctors, but it didn't do quite what they thought it did. But here, these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, they have a fragrance that purifies the air of illness, but the fragrance itself also is meant to be one of the ways that you can lead beings to enlightenment. We've talked about how you can lead beings to enlightenment using skillful actions and skillful words and all this other stuff, supernatural powers. Here you can actually lead beings to enlightenment simply through smelling, especially enlightening or something like that. It's very interesting. We don't really see this in very many other sutras, but this sort of thing is kind of common.
At the time, it was called miasma theory, at least in Europe, and it was just a theory that disease partially comes from bad smells.
Exactly, yeah.
And you can kind of understand where that would come from, just because a lot of things that smell bad also have other aspects that cause sickness. Like, a corpse smells awful if measures haven't been taken to preserve it, and they also carry disease if you get too close to it. So you can kind of see where this idea of miasma coming up and the smell being the problem, you can see where it starts, because it does have a partial basis in reality. They've just misunderstood which part is which.
Exactly, yeah. And it's very common among different cultures.
And like the plague doctor masks, those are the beak masks you were talking about. Those were filled with herbs to try to counteract that miasma, but the herbs weren't the part that were actually preventing anything. It was the mask part. Okay. So 2 more details. First off, at one point we're talking about obtaining a halo of light like the Buddha. Has this halo come up before? I know we have the tuft of hair between his eyes that can project light. Is that what they're talking about?
No, this is actually very much a Judeo-Christian looking halo. We've heard it described before in other sutras where they use the word aureole, Aureole, to describe it, but that's kind of actually borrowed from these art historians looking at Christian statues and Christian imagery. It really refers to actually a physical disk of light behind the head or above the head of a holy figure. And all Buddhas are allegedly supposed to have this, unrelated to the tuft in between the eyes. That is a thing, and you do get that whenever you become a Buddha, but that is not what's being referred to here. They're actually talking about bright light in like a circle, a filled circle behind the head of a Buddha. And oftentimes that light will have different images of different Buddhas within it also. So if you look really closely at it and you kind of get into a state where you can sort of split apart the light rays and see the different colors, then some sutras argue that you can see like myriad Buddhas in each ray of light. Out of the 16 million colors that the human eyeball can see, each color will have strains of Buddhas within that ray. And so the totality of the light within it, you can see all these other realms, all these other Buddhas, all these other bodhisattvas. And so it's sort of a mark of like a highly achieved Buddha or bodhisattva to have one of these.
Okay. And that fits with other stuff we've read about, the uncountably many bodhisattvas and Buddhas that come up in the sutras, so it makes sense. Last detail that I wanted to pick up. There are a couple of points where the term carry off everything comes up. I'm looking right now at page 97. There is, with the seal adamantine fist, one is able to carry off everything, and one gains success with seals. Is that talking about super strength? Is that talking about telekinesis? Like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, so that is referring to a literal super strength, but also you could say that it could be read metaphorically and symbolically as well. And carry off everything sort of means deliver all to enlightenment, carry off all attachments, carry off all suffering, carry off all conceptions and discriminatory and calculative thinking, carry off all notions that the mind comes up with and imposes upon reality and which paves over its true nature and prevents us from reaching enlightenment. So this is sort of an interpretive statement that could go a lot of different directions. Super strength is one of the superpowers that you can get, but also it's literal super strength, but also like the ability to carry off all of the activities of mind that prevent a person from seeing the true nature of reality.
Okay, so it's both.
Right.
Got it. As usual. I think that's all I had here. Like we said, a lot of the things that we would discuss here, we discussed last time. It has a lot of the same shape overall, and at this point what we're picking apart is mostly details, it feels like.
It is, yeah.
So anything you wanted to talk about that I missed?
Yeah, the last thing I just wanted to bring up as we're wrapping up this sutra and moving on to another one in the near future, I wanted to just come back to this structure of the whole text. It's definitely very, very different from any of the other previous sutras that we've read, because there's no "thus have I heard" at the beginning, and there's no assembled disciples with which the Buddha has dialogues, and there's no collective audience. There's no various kinds of sentient beings who listen and respond to the Buddha's teaching. There's no reaction from the world itself. There's no giant earthquake or thunderclap or anything like that we usually hear whenever the Buddha preaches in other sutras. And there's no consecration at the end where there's a prayer for the protection and the preservation of the sutra and the teaching, and there's no discussion of how much merit somebody gets from spreading the teaching and teaching it to other people. And so it's fascinating that this text is so different and that it lacks all of that. And part of the reasons why that it lacks all of that is because it's reading much more, like we said, like a ritual manual text than a sermon that contains specific doctrines that you want to spread and teach to everybody. And this has to do with the fact that it's an esoteric text. This text is not meant to be read and understood by the wider laity. It's meant to be taught to an audience of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. We've talked before about how the Buddha caters his sermons according to who he's talking to, and according to this esoteric category that we've sort of been bouncing around in with this text. The idea is that the Buddha preaches the Four Noble Truths to regular lay people and to everything and everyone below regular lay people, so animals, hungry ghosts, hell dwellers. And then he preaches emptiness and suchness and the Bodhisattva path to the Bodhisattvas. And then he preaches this sort of stuff to fully realized Buddhas. So it's very fascinating to track the structural changes that happen to texts that take place as you move along on this hierarchy. This hierarchy is definitely constructed by the texts themselves, right? We've talked about that with all of the discussions we've had about interdenominational sniping that goes on. But here, there's no sniping as much as there is just such a clear rejection of the stuff that we see in the other sutras. There's no narrative. There's no, the Buddha visited Vulture Peak at Rajagriha and he said this to all the assembled bodhisattvas and animals and lay people. There's none of that conventional stuff that we're used to. And the reason why is because in this esoteric category, the thought is that the Buddhas don't need that. They don't do all that stuff when they talk to each other. Whenever one Buddha talks to another one to, in this case, induct him into a mandala or to seal his secret Buddha knowledge with a mudra or some such thing like that, he doesn't have to create a narrative and he doesn't have to shoot light out of the tuft of hair between his eyes. This is all sort of describing the dialogue that Buddhas use with each other rather than the dialogue that they use with everybody else. And so that's why it's kind of thought of as being secret and preserved, because this is sort of the conversations that Buddhas have with each other that other people don't always get to see. So it's very fascinating to read it from that perspective and to think about how that changes how it's understood and adapted to ritual contexts and to religious traditions all across East Asia.
Non-duality and all of that makes this probably a bad idea, but I could see this kind of text being put in a different category than a sutra. This reads, at least this part of it that we're discussing right now, this reads more like a grimoire, something that somebody who is already advanced in a specific thing. Like a grimoire is basically an open spell book. And they kind of function the same way as Fascicle 3 functions in this text, as just a description of rituals and rites one can use and the effects they have. So if someone came up to me and said, I don't think that this portion is a sutra, I think that there's some ground to stand on there. Now, non-duality, interconnectedness, I don't think the Buddha would like another distinct boundary drawn there, and I'm not sure that it's particularly useful, at least to scholars. But this is also something that I would not give to a beginner, because they're not going to have the background necessary to even begin understanding what's happening here. I've been on this show for however long now, and there's still a lot here that I have to come and ask about. There's a lot here that I'm having to just soak in and let go by, and I think a beginner would be overwhelmed by that. So, like, is this a sutra? I mean, yes, it's a sutra. That's what we're talking about, but is it a sutra?
No, that's a valid question. So we talked briefly very early on in the show about what is and is not a sutra, and we've talked about how there's like a spectrum of how to define it, and the most broad and general definition of a sutra would be anything written down that proclaims to be a sermon given by the Buddha himself. It could be any Buddha, and it can sometimes even be a bodhisattva, such as in the case of the Heart Sutra, which many believe is given by Avalokiteshvara. And then the most narrow definition of a sutra is something that comes up in the Pali Canon and nothing else outside of that. Or something that comes out in the Taisho Canon, the Mahayana Canon, and nothing outside of that. And so it becomes very difficult to apply these categories knowing that there's texts out there that exist that look like this, which is structurally problematic for other sutras, which is doctrinally problematic for other sutras. So it's very common in especially the study of Tibetan Buddhism to categorize some of these texts as tantras, which we've talked about before, but also to, you're just forced to broaden your perspective on what a sutra can be and what it is. Some tantras are sutras. One of the other very important esoteric texts that we're going to read and discuss later on is the Vajrasekhara Abhisambodhi Sutra, the sutra describing the enlightenment of Vajrayana. And that one is also simultaneously called the Vajrasekhara Abhisambodhi Tantra. So, what do? It's also possible to define these as being sermons that are recited. So it won't necessarily just be something given by the Buddha, but something that you recite during regular practice, either as a monastic or as a layperson. And it's very shaky and very hazy as to, how to categorize the text. And I think that you're right. It looks like a grimoire in a lot of cases. It looks like a ritual manual and a spell manual. And it looks like possibly a tantra, and it looks like a sutra. And so this is why we sort of lean on non-duality a lot to say it just is what it is.
Right. I think that's a good note to leave off on. Anything else we should get on the recording?
Nope, that takes care of it for me.
All right. Well, in that case, let's bring this to a close. This concludes our discussion of the Vajrasekhara Sutra. Next time when we're talking about sutras, we'll be on a different one.
We hope you enjoy, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. Many thanks to our patron, Tanner. If you would like to join him, please take a look at patreon.com/brightonbuddhism. We thank you for your support.
My name is Nick Bright, scholar of East Asian religions and the voice of Hearer.
And I'm Docs, editor, question asker, producer, and voice of Hermit.
And this has been Bright on Buddhism. Thank you for listening. If you like our podcast, or if you have a question you'd like for us to discuss, we'd love to hear from you. Please consider leaving a comment, a review, or subscribing, or joining us on social media. Email us at bright.on.buddhism@gmail.com, or find us on Patreon at patreon.com/brightonbuddhism. As always, citations and resources for this episode can be found in the show notes. Thank you.